Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. Lebanon's President Michel Aoun has designated Saad al-Hariri as Prime Minister to form a new government. Hariri won the backing of a majority of the parliamentarians in consultations with Aoun. Last year, he stepped down from the post of the Prime Minister in the wake of the nationwide protests against the ruling elite. Pakistan says any misadventure by India in Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan will get a firm response. At a weekly press briefing, Foreign Office spokesman Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry said India should be mindful of its defense limitations, which were exposed in February last year and more recently in Ladakh. In Afghanistan, 12 civilians have been killed in an airstrike by the government forces in northeastern Tahar province. A spokesman for the provincial governor says 7 others were wounded when the air raid hit a mosque accidentally. Children were also among those killed. Azerbaijan says Armenian forces have targeted civilians in Siazan, Gabala and Kurdamir cities with ballistic missiles. Dozens of civilians and hundreds of soldiers have been killed in the fighting over the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh since the 27th of September. China says Washington's arms sale to Taiwan will have a major impact on its ties with the United States. Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian said Beijing will react appropriately as the situation unfolds. This comes as the U.S. State Department approved a sale of 3 weapon systems to Taiwan. The number of coronavirus infections has surpassed 41 million worldwide with over 1.13 million fatalities. India has recorded 702 deaths and nearly 57,000 infections overnight as its case load rises to 7.7 million. In Pakistan, 10 more people have died of the virus in the last 24 hours, taking the toll to over 6,700. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. In Lebanon, President Michel Aoun has designated Saad al-Hariri as Prime Minister to form a new government. Hariri won the backing of a majority of the parliamentarians in consultations with Aoun. In a short address, Hariri said he will form a government of non-partisan experts to implement economic and political reforms. He pledged to reconstruct Beirut from damage following the deadly explosion in August. The Hezbollah party did not vote for Hariri despite being among the most enthusiastic proponents of his return. Last year, he stepped down from the post of Prime Minister in the wake of the nationwide protests against the ruling elite. Pakistan says any misadventure by India in Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan will get a full-spectrum response. At a weekly press briefing, Foreign Office spokesman said India should be mindful of its defense limitations, which were exposed in February last year and more recently in Ladakh. Zahid Hafiz Chaudhry said the Indian leadership must not underestimate the level of preparedness of Pakistan's armed forces. The spokesman said that despite multiple challenges at home, New Delhi continues to act like a regional hegemon. The spokesman urged India to peacefully resolve disputes with the neighbors for a lasting peace in South Asia. Pakistan's President Dr. Arif Alvi says Islamabad attaches great importance to its cordial relations with Saudi Arabia. The President made these remarks during a meeting with Saudi envoy to Pakistan, Nawaf Saeed Al-Maliki. Alvi said Pakistan wants to further expand bilateral ties with a brotherly country for the mutual benefit of the two sides. President of International Islamic University, Islamabad, Dr. Hatal Hamoud Al-Otaibi was also present during the meeting. Dr. Alvi said he hopes the university will progress further under Dr. Al-Otaibi's leadership. The president asked him to strengthen global links between the institution and reputed foreign universities of Saudi Arabia. 12 civilians have been killed in a government airstrike in Afghanistan's northeastern Tahar province. A spokesperson for Tahar's governor said 7 people were injured after a mosque was hit accidentally. A provincial council secretary said many of the victims are children. This comes after Tahar's deputy police chief said around 50 policemen were killed in the clashes with the Taliban. Azerbaijan says Armenian forces have targeted civilians in Siazan, Gabala and Kurdamir cities with ballistic missiles. Azeri head of the Foreign Policy Affairs, Hikmat Hajiyev, said Yerevan hit the areas from Gafan and Jarmuk regions. He said these actions by Armenian forces amount to war crimes. Earlier, Turkey said it will send troops to support Azerbaijan over the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict if Baku requests. Turkish Vice President Fuat Oktay said Ankara will not hesitate to launch boots on the ground in Baku's favor. Turkey says it is open to the option of buying the Patriot ballistic missile defense systems from the US. In an interview, Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar said Ankara is willing to buy the US systems despite the purchase of Russia's S-400s. Akar said buying Moscow's S-400 was a necessity and it does not mean Turkey's alienation from NATO. But he said Ankara will buy the US systems only if it guarantees the safe transfer of the technology, joint production and delivery schedule. He said Turkey cannot be dodged by Washington's contradictory statements on its willingness to sell the defense systems. The minister also confirmed that Turkey recently conducted tests of the S-400 defense systems. China says Washington's arms sale to Taiwan will have a major impact on Sino-US ties. This comes as the US State Department approved a sale of 3 weapon systems worth $1.8 billion to Taiwan. Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian said Beijing will respond appropriately as the situation develops. Earlier, the U.S. State Department sent a formal notification to the Congress giving it 30 days to object to any sales. Taiwan has welcomed the development, saying the weapons will help improve its defensive capabilities. Defense Minister Yan Defa said Taiwan is not seeking an arms race with China. Last week, China urged the U.S. to cancel the planned sales. The U.S. has accused Iran of interfering in the 2020 election. U.S. Director of the National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, said this in a news conference with FBI Director Christopher Wray in Washington. Ratcliffe alleged Iran sent spoofed emails designed to intimidate Democratic voters and incite social unrest. Ratcliffe said these actions are desperate attempts by the desperate adversaries. He also blamed Russia again for obtaining voter information.
This data can be used by foreign actors to attempt to communicate false information to registered voters that they hope will cause confusion, sow chaos, and undermine your confidence in American democracy. To that end, we have already seen Iran sending spoofed emails designed to intimidate voters, incite social unrest, and damage President Trump.
Iran's mission to the UN has denied the accusation. Spokesperson Ali Raza Mir Yousevi said Iran has no interest in interfering in the US election. Now moving on, Iran says it has started its annual air defense exercises with a display of the ground-to-air missile systems. Local media said the drills are designed to test missiles, radar and reconnaissance systems. It said the exercises will involve fighter jets, bombers and drones, especially locally manufactured military equipment. Earlier, Iran said it is self-reliant in its defense and will not resort to a weapons buying spree. An official Israeli delegation is in Sudan to discuss normalizing diplomatic ties with the African country. Israel's state broadcaster said the two government delegations will meet today in Khartoum. Speaking to media, Intelligence Minister Eli Cohen said Israel is very close to normalizing ties with Sudan. Tel Aviv's cabinet members have hinted that Washington will announce another normalization deal before the U.S. election. Earlier, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the U.S. is working diligently to get Sudan to recognize Israel. He made the remarks while announcing the process of removing Sudan from the U.S. list of terrorism-sponsoring states has begun. The U.S. says it has begun the process of removing Sudan from its list of state sponsors of terrorism. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington is also working to get Khartoum to recognize Israel. Speaking to the media, Pompeo said a lot of work has been done regarding this. Pompeo added he believes there will be enormous bipartisan consensus over the Khartoum's removal from the list. Earlier, President Donald Trump announced a delisting of Sudan after it transferred $335 million to compensate U.S. victims. Meanwhile, Sudanese security forces fired tear gas to disperse the protesters calling for reforms. Medics say at least one protester has been killed and several others injured in the clashes with police across Khartoum. The global toll of the COVID-19 cases has surpassed 41 million with over 1.13 million fatalities. India has recorded 702 deaths and nearly 56,000 infections overnight, increasing its caseload to 7.7 million. In the US, the death toll has crossed 222,000 with over 8.3 million people infected. Latest on the pandemic in this report.
Healthcare systems in a number of countries are being overwhelmed as the second wave of COVID-19 takes the world by storm. In Europe, authorities in countries from Poland to Portugal have expressed mounting alarm at the renewed crisis confronting their health infrastructure. The growing number of cases in France, coupled with the setting in of winter season, has swamped the hospitals. Meanwhile, Spain has become the first European country to exceed 1 million coronavirus infections.
Over the last week, we've seen, and that has been a phenomena in all of Barcelona and Catalonia, an increase in cases needing emergency assistance for COVID patients and a consequent increase in critical patients. Now, we can say that we have 14 patients in our ICU, that is to say more than in September, and we already have quite a few more hospitalized patients who practically occupy 2 floors instead of 1.
5 of the countries with the highest cases are in Latin America. Pan American Health Organization says the region is not out of pandemic's first wave. It has urged LATAM countries to not relax measures aimed at containing the spread of the virus until vaccines become available. Meanwhile, in Argentina, some 70,000 health workers have been infected with COVID-19 so far. Healthcare workers in the country have taken to streets to demand better working conditions.
Our working conditions and salaries are precarious, insecure, illegal, and very dangerous. We are dying because of working conditions. In our country, we have had more than 100 deaths because of working conditions. In Buenos Aires, it's 11. So 10% of deaths are happening in the capital, which is meant to be where health workers are better prepared.
Over in Australia, Melbourne's 5 suburbs have been put on high alert after new infections sparked fears of a fresh outbreak.
Pakistan's COVID-19 death toll has exceeded 6,700 after 10 more people lost their lives to the virus overnight. The health ministry says 736 people tested positive for the disease in the past 24 hours. The ministry said there are over 9,000 active COVID-19 cases in the country. It said out of over 325,000 countrywide cases, more than 309,000 have recovered so far. The ministry said over 142,000 cases have been detected in the Sindh province, while Punjab has reported over 101,000 cases. In the capital Islamabad, over 18,000 have been infected so far. US President Donald Trump and his predecessor Barack Obama have directed blistering attacks at each other during rival rallies. Obama delivered a sweeping condemnation of Trump, urging the voters not to sit out the November 3rd election. More in this report.
Just 13 days to go before the United States presidential election, the gloves are off. Former President Barack Obama and President Donald Trump have gone all out against each other at election rallies. In his first in-person campaign pitch for Democratic candidate Joe Biden, Obama blasted Trump's handling of the coronavirus pandemic, his response to racial unrest, and his fundamental unfitness for the job.
But I did hope, for the sake of the country, that he might show some interest in taking the job seriously. But it hasn't happened. He hasn't shown any interest in doing the work or helping anybody but himself and his friends, or treating the presidency like a reality show that he can use to get attention. And by the way, even then his TV ratings are down. So you know that upsets him.
Biden has been off the campaign trail all week, preparing for the final presidential debate later today. Meanwhile, Trump has been working overtime, holding rallies across the battleground swing states. At a rally in North Carolina, he said Obama has not been able to get over Trump's 2016 victory and has been fuming over it every single day.
But before that, he said he will not run. He didn't know me. Then I ran. Then he said he will not get the nomination. Then I got the nomination. Then he said he will not be our president. Then I won. I think the only one more unhappy than Crooked Hillary that night was Barack Hussein Obama. The only one. Barack Hussein Obama.
Trump and Biden will face off today in the last presidential debate before the 2020 election, while Obama will next hit the crucial election state of Florida, which has 29 electoral college votes.
It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Buildings have been set aflame with the reports of gunfire in Nigeria's biggest city of Lagos after security forces shot at protesters. Amnesty International says forces have shot dead at least 12 people while they were protesting against police brutality. Armed police have tried to enforce a round-the-clock curfew in the commercial capital and some other regions, but the groups of young people blocked a number of major roads with overturned traffic signs and rocks. Youths stormed and set ablaze a major TV station with links to a ruling party politician. A viral video allegedly showing police officers killing a young man sparked the unrest in Lagos 2 weeks ago. In Guinea, 13 people have reportedly been killed following days of unrest after a tense weekend presidential election. In a statement, the security ministry said 2 police officers were among those slain. It said there were clashes in the opposition strongholds outside the capital, Conakry, and elsewhere in the country. The violence follows President Alpha Conde's run for a 3rd term. Conde says a constitutional referendum in March has reset his 2-term limit. He has called for a calm as opposition protests over initial results from Sunday's election, which showed Conde leading the field. French police have launched an investigation after 2 women were stabbed near the Eiffel Tower in a suspected racist attack. Police have arrested 2 white female suspects who allegedly shouted "dirty Arabs" as they launched the assault. Prosecutors say it is too early in the probe to classify the attack as a hate crime. This comes a day after President Emmanuel Macron decided to disband a Muslim organization following the beheading of a teacher who showed blasphemous caricatures to his pupils. Muslim activists have accused Macron of trying to repress Islam in the country. In Thailand, the government has ordered the lifting of emergency measures imposed to curb ongoing protests. In a statement, the government said the violent situation has eased. It read the situation now allows the government officials and the state agencies to enforce regular laws. For the past 3 months, Thailand has been marred by protests against Prime Minister Prayut Chan-o-cha. The demonstrators are also demanding a slashing of Thai monarchy's powers. Thai's lawyers for human rights said the police have arrested at least 80 people for taking part in the demonstrations. NATO says 2020 will be the sixth consecutive year of increased defense spending by European allies and Canada. Speaking ahead of a virtual meeting of the alliance's defense ministers, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said he is hopeful this trend will continue. He also said NATO will continue reducing tensions between Greece and Turkey in the eastern Mediterranean.
COVID-19 has not made all the challenges go away. So it remains vital to invest in our defense. At this ministerial, we will discuss our progress toward fairer burden sharing.
The global pandemic has caused a major change in daily life routines all over the world. In many parts of the world, schools have been closed to try and combat the rising number of COVID-19 infections. But that hasn't stopped a few teachers in Naples, Italy, from finding a creative way to help children catch up on their studies. This report has the details.
School teacher Pamela Buda has taken her class to public steps after educational institutions were closed in Campania region. Two children are seated at a distance on each step, leaving just enough room for locals to walk past them. She doesn't want her students to miss out, especially as parents told her how tough no school has been for the children.
In truth, I had never thought to stop teaching. From the very start, I've been thinking about solutions with the help of the mothers to try and understand how they felt. After that, mothers called me and said that the kids are in a valley of tears. They're crying because they want to go back to schools, because they don't understand why schools need to be closed.
Buda is not the only teacher in Naples finding alternatives with a bit of fresh air to the traditional classroom. Tonino Stonaiolo and his colleague have also found an interesting way of holding their classes. They divided their class into small groups of children who take class from balconies and outside on the streets of their homes.
Everything respecting the rules, because I think this emergency is serious in Italy and real. So everything we try to do is absolutely in respect of the rules and of the dramatic situation that we are living through. I want to find a way in which the kids could see us and share time with us, at least until we will be able to, and until a new possible lockdown is definitely avoided.
The credit for this goes to the dedication and ingenuity of the teachers and their love for children. One thing is for sure, though, the students seem quite happy to carry out their studying in the street. And who knows, maybe even the neighbors will learn something.
Paul McCartney will release McCartney 3 in December, 50 years after his first solo album. It is a new collection of stripped black songs, all written, performed and produced by the ex-Beatle. Recorded this year in Sussex, it joins two other solo albums, McCartney and McCartney 2. They were created by the 78-year-old in 1970 and 1980 when he was seeking a creative rebirth. Speaking of the album, McCartney said it was more about making music for yourself rather than doing a job. McCartney's most recent album in 2018's Egypt Station and the musician was still touring last year. Britain has announced resuming the post-Brexit trade negotiations with the European Union today. The initial phase of the negotiations will take place in London and will last for 4 days. Just a few days after announcing that talks have ended, Downing Street said in a statement that it will discuss further ties with the EU delegation. It stated both parties have jointly agreed on a set of principles for handling the intensified phase of talks. London said the meeting will try to bridge the Brexit's most difficult policy gaps between Britain and the EU. All European stocks are trading in negative territory amid continuing uncertainty over US coronavirus stimulus and surging infections. Frankfurt's DAX has shed over 0.5%. The pan-European stock 600 too have lost 0.5%. London's FTSE has declined marginally, while Italy's FTSE MIB has slipped close to 0.5%. In Paris, the CAC 40 slipped more than 0.5%. Earlier, all the Asian stocks edged down with the exception of Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index. In football, Bayern Munich beat Atletico Madrid 4-0 in their Champions League opener. With this victory, Bayern have stretched their winning run in the competition to 12 games. Winger Kingsley Coman scored twice while assisting another. Coman put Bayern ahead in the 28th minute, later setting up Leon Goretzka to fire in the second and the 41st. Corritin Tolisso killed off any Spanish hopes of a comeback with a sensational shot in the 66th minute. Atletico came close just once in the entire first half with Luis Suarez. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.